The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as I arranged the last of the pink roses in the crystal vase. The same vase I'd inherited from my mother 40 years ago. Today was Zoe's 32nd birthday, and despite everything, I'd spent the week planning this celebration with the meticulous care I'd always given to my daughter's special days. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier, set for 12 with my best china, the pattern she'd once called too fancy for real life, but secretly loved. I smoothed my navy dress, the one she'd bought me last Christmas, though I suspected her husband Richard had chosen it from the clearance rack, and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. At 63, I still carried myself with the dignity my own mother had insisted upon, even when my heart felt as fragile as autumn leaves. The doorbell chimed at exactly 2 o'clock. Zoe swept in wearing a designer dress I knew cost more than my monthly Social Security check, her husband Richard trailing behind with their 2 children, 8-year-old Emma and 10-year-old Michael. My grandchildren barely glanced up from their phones as they passed me, mumbling perfunctory hellos. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, embracing Zoe carefully. She felt stiff in my arms, already scanning the room as if calculating the effort I'd put into this day against some invisible ledger in her mind. "Mom, you really didn't need to go to all this trouble," she said, but her tone suggested she expected nothing less. Richard nodded curtly, immediately gravitating toward the liquor cabinet I'd stocked with his favorite bourbon, the expensive kind that cost me a week's grocery budget. The rest of the family arrived in clusters. My son-in-law's parents, Zoe's college friends, a few neighbors she'd specifically requested I invite. I moved through the afternoon like a ghost in my own home, refilling glasses, serving the 3-course meal I'd spent 2 days preparing, cleaning up the wrapping paper from gifts I'd carefully selected and wrapped. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody mentioned that I'd lost 15 pounds since my last doctor's visit, or that the house felt too big and too quiet since my husband William had passed 3 years ago. They consumed my hospitality like air, invisible, expected, unremarkable. As evening approached and the guests began to thin out, I found myself alone with Zoe in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with plates still sticky with frosting from the birthday cake I'd made from scratch. She leaned against the counter, wineglass in hand, studying me with the calculating look she'd perfected in her corporate job. "Mom, we need to talk about something important," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver news she'd already decided was non-negotiable. I continued loading dishes, my hands steady despite the way my chest tightened. "What is it, honey?" "Richard got the promotion. We're moving to the new house in Westchester next month." She paused, swirling her wine. "We've been thinking about what to do with you." The plate in my hand slipped slightly, but I caught it before it could fall. "Do with me? You can't stay here alone, Mom. This house is too big, too expensive to maintain. And honestly, you're getting to the age where you need supervision." She said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "We've looked into some really nice assisted living facilities." I set the plate down carefully, my movements deliberate. "I'm 63, Zoe. I'm not infirm. You're forgetting things. Last month you called me 3 times about the same prescription. And Mrs. Henderson said she saw you wandering around the garden at midnight in your nightgown. I was checking on the roses. There'd been a storm. See? That's exactly what I mean. Normal people don't garden at midnight." She finished her wine and set the glass down with a definitive clink. "We've already put a deposit down on Sunset Manor. It's very nice. They have activities, meals included, medical staff on site." The words hit me like physical blows. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the familiar weight of being managed, diminished, reduced to a problem to be solved. "And my house? We'll sell it, of course. The equity will pay for the facility, and anything left over we'll put in a trust for the kids' college funds." She was already pulling out her phone, probably to text Richard about how smoothly the conversation had gone. "Oh, and Mom? We'll need you to start sorting through your things. You can only bring personal items, clothes, a few photos, that sort of thing. No furniture." I stood there in my gleaming kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of her celebration, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. 40 years of marriage, 32 years of motherhood, A lifetime of memories and choices reduced to personal items and that sort of thing. When do you need my answer? I asked quietly. She glanced up from her phone, surprised. Oh, it's not really a question, Mom. We've already signed the papers. You have until the end of the month to pack. The silence stretched between us, filled with the hum of the dishwasher and the distant sound of Richard calling for her from the living room. I studied my daughter's face, the face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years, the face I'd watched graduate from college, walk down the aisle, light up with joy when she held her first child. Zoe, I said finally, my voice so calm it surprised even me. Look at me. She looked up, irritation flickering across her features at being interrupted from her phone. The only thing you can still give me is work, I said, the words forming slowly, each one deliberate. Isn't that what you're telling me? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even guilt. But then Richard's voice called again, impatient now, and she straightened her shoulders. Don't be dramatic, Mom. This is what's best for everyone. She headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and can you pack up the leftover cake? The kids will want it for lunch tomorrow. I watched her go, heard the front door close, listened to the sounds of cars starting and driving away. The house settled into its familiar evening quiet, but something had shifted in the silence. Something had broken, yes, but something else had awakened. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden I'd tended for 23 years, the roses I'd planted to mark each anniversary, each birthday, each milestone. In the fading light, they looked like small promises I'd made to myself, promises I'd forgotten I was allowed to keep. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start keeping them again. The morning after Zoe's birthday, I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house felt different around me, not empty, but full of possibility. I made coffee in my favorite mug, the one William had given me on our 15th anniversary with "World's Best Mom" painted in fading gold letters, and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. For the first time in decades, I began to take inventory of my life. The house was worth $380,000. I'd had it appraised 6 months ago when I was considering refinancing. My savings account held $47,000, money I'd scraped together from William's life insurance and my careful management of our Social Security. I had no debt, no mortgage, no monthly payments except utilities and maintenance. On paper, I was more financially secure than most people my age. But more than that, I was free. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found online the night before. "Morrison and Associates, Real Estate," a cheerful voice answered. "Hello, I'd like to speak to someone about selling my house. Quickly." Within 2 hours, Janet Morrison was sitting in my living room, her eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she recognized an opportunity when she saw one. "Mrs. Finney, this is a beautiful property. The market is very strong right now for homes in this neighborhood. I think we could have you under contract within 2 weeks, maybe sooner. I need it sold in 10 days, I said calmly. "I'm flexible on price if the timeline is firm." She raised an eyebrows. "That's aggressive. May I ask why the rush?" I thought about Zoe's voice, casual and certain, reducing my life to a logistics problem. "I'm making some changes." The next call was to my bank. Within an hour, I was sitting across from a loan officer named Warren, explaining that I wanted to transfer the deed of my house to my adopted son, Eddie, and that I needed to understand the tax implications. "Mrs. Finney, this is a substantial gift. Are you sure you want to do this?" Eddie had been 17 when I'd taken him in, a friend of Zoe's who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. For 15 years, he'd been the son I'd never had, calling every week, visiting on holidays, bringing his wife Christine and their 3 children to Sunday dinners. He'd never asked for anything, never expected anything, never treated my love as an entitlement. "I'm very sure," I told Warren. The third call was to the travel agency downtown. By 3 o'clock, I had a plane ticket to Paris, a reservation at a small hotel in the Loire Valley, and enrollment in a 6-week sommelier course at the École du Vin. The fourth call was to my attorney. "Margaret, I need to make some changes to my will, and I need to update my power of attorney." Margaret Todd had been my lawyer for 20 years. She'd handled William's estate, helped me navigate the aftermath of his death, and knew the complexities of my family better than most. What kind of changes, Barbara? I want to remove Zoe as beneficiary and executor. I want Eddie to handle everything. There was a long pause. Barbara, that's a significant change. Are you sure you want to do this without discussing it with Zoe first? I'm sure. That evening, I called Eddie. His voice was warm when he answered, the way it always was. Hey, Mom, how are you feeling? Christine was just saying we should come by this weekend, maybe bring the kids to work in the garden with you. Mom. He'd been calling me that for 10 years, and it still made my heart flutter with gratitude. Eddie, I need to ask you something important. How would you feel about moving into my house? What do you mean? I explained the situation, not all of it. Not the cruel calculations or the dismissive tone, but enough. Zoe thinks I should go to assisted living. She's probably right that this house is too big for me alone. Mom, you're 63. You're sharper than people half your age. If you want to stay in your house, you should stay in your house. But what if I don't want to? What if I want to do something else with my life? There was a pause. Then his voice came back softer. Then you should do something else. You've earned the right to live however you want. The house is yours, Eddie. I'm having the deed transferred tomorrow. Mom, I can't. You can. You have 3 children who need stability. You've been renting that apartment for 5 years, throwing money away. This house needs a family in it. I took a breath. I need to know it's going to someone who sees it as a home, not an asset. I could hear him crying on the other end of the line. Where will you go? France. I'm going to learn about wine. That night, I called Zoe. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice distracted. Mom, I'm putting the kids to bed. Can this wait? I wanted to let you know I won't be needing that assisted living facility. What do you mean? I've made other arrangements. Mom, we've already put down the deposit. The papers are signed. You can't just change your mind. Actually, I can. It's my life. I heard her sigh. That particular sound of exasperation she'd perfected as a teenager. Fine. We'll talk about this tomorrow. I'll come by after work. I won't be here. What? I'm going to France. I'm leaving tomorrow. The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, her voice came back, sharp with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just run away because you don't like our decision. It wasn't your decision to make. Mom, you're being completely irrational. You can't just... I hung up. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them and finished packing. At 9 o'clock, Eddie arrived with his family to help me load my 2 suitcases into his truck. Are you sure about this? Christine asked, hugging me tight. I've never been more sure of anything. Their children, my grandchildren by choice, clung to me with the uncomplicated affection I'd forgotten was possible. 10-year-old Louise whispered in my ear, "We'll take good care of your roses." At the airport, Eddie walked me to security. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. You already have. You've been thanking me for 15 years just by being yourself. As I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent, my phone rang. Zoe's number flashed on the screen. I turned the phone off and stepped toward my new life. The Loire Valley in September was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. The morning mist clung to the vineyards like gentle fingers, and the air carried the sweet weight of grapes ready for harvest. I stood on the terrace of the Château de Chambord, a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching the sun paint the landscape in shades of gold and amber. 3 weeks had passed since I'd left Chicago. 3 weeks of silence from my phone, of learning French phrases like terroir and millésime, of discovering that my palate could distinguish between wines I'd never dreamed of tasting. 3 weeks of remembering who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's burden, someone's problem to be solved. "Bonjour, Barbara," called Marie Dubois, the sommelier instructor who'd become something like a friend. "Ready for today's tasting?" I was staying at a small bed and breakfast in the village of Amboise, run by a woman named Sylvie who spoke English with a charming accent and had appointed herself my guardian angel. Every morning she would pack me a lunch and send me off to the wine school with encouraging words and the kind of maternal concern I'd forgotten I deserved. The sommelier course was challenging in ways I hadn't expected. Not just the technical aspects, learning to identify tannins and acidity, understanding the difference between Old World and New World wines, but the way it required me to trust my own perceptions. For so many years, I'd deferred to other people's opinions, other people's needs, other people's definitions of what was appropriate for a woman my age. Today we taste the Chinon, Marie announced to our small class of 8 students. This wine tells a story of the land, of the people who make it, of the seasons that shape it. I lifted the glass, swirled the deep red wine, and breathed in its complexity. Cherry and earth, tobacco and herbs, something that spoke of autumn afternoons and long conversations by the fire. For the first time in years, I trusted what I tasted. Madame Finney, Marie said, what do you think? I said slowly, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice, that this wine has been waiting a long time to be appreciated. That afternoon, I returned to the bed and breakfast to find Sylvie waiting for me with a concerned expression and my cell phone in her hand. I am sorry, but this has been ringing all day. The woman? She sounds very upset. I looked at the phone like it was a snake. 57 missed calls from Zoe, 32 from Richard, 12 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemail icon showed 93 messages. Would you like me to listen to them? Sylvie asked gently. Sometimes it is easier when someone else hears the words first. I nodded, grateful for her kindness. Sylvie listened to the messages with the phone pressed to her ear, her expression growing more grave with each one. Finally, she set it down and looked at me with the kind of directness that only the French can manage. Your daughter. She is very angry. She says you have given away her inheritance. She says you have abandoned your grandchildren. She says... Sylvie paused, choosing her words carefully. She says many things that are not true. What else? She has hired a lawyer. She is trying to say you are not, how do you say, competent to make decisions. She wants to take control of your money. I sat down heavily on the small sofa in Sylvie's living room, feeling the weight of the ocean between me and the mess I'd left behind. Can she do that? In France, we have a saying, Sylvie said, settling beside me. Les chiens aboient, la caravane passe. The dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. That evening I called Margaret Todd. It was early morning in Chicago, and she answered on the second ring. Barbara, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know, I'm in France. Zoe has filed for conservatorship. She's claiming you're mentally incompetent, that you made the property transfer under duress. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Can she do that? She can try. But Barbara, you're going to have to come back and fight this. She's already frozen your bank accounts pending the hearing. She's what? She got a temporary restraining order. She's claiming you're a danger to yourself, that you're being financially exploited by Eddie. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Eddie, who's never asked me for anything in 15 years. Eddie, who called me Mom before it was legally true. I know. But you need to come home. The hearing is next week. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the village under the stars, past the closed shops in the ancient church, trying to process the reality that my daughter was willing to destroy my life to control it. At the river, I sat on a stone wall and called Eddie. Mom, are you okay? Zoe's been calling here non-stop. She's saying crazy things. I'm fine, but I need to know, are you and Christine prepared for this fight? Because it's going to get ugly. Mom, you gave us the most incredible gift. You trusted us with your home, your sanctuary. We'll fight for you as long as it takes. It might cost us everything. Then we'll lose everything together. But we won't let her win. After I hung up, I sat by the river for a long time, watching the water flow toward the sea. In the distance, I could see the chateau where Eleanor of Aquitaine had once lived. A woman who'd refused to be diminished by the men who tried to control her. A woman who'd fought for her rights and her dignity until the very end. I thought about Zoe, probably pacing in her expensive house, calculating the cost of this legal battle against the value of the inheritance she felt entitled to. I thought about Eddie and Christine, preparing to defend a gift they'd never asked for. I thought about my grandchildren, caught in the middle of a war they didn't understand. And I thought about the woman I'd been becoming in these 3 weeks, the woman who could taste complexity in wine, who could speak French phrases with growing confidence, who could trust her own judgment. The next morning, I booked a flight home. "You will come back?" Sylvie asked as she drove me to the airport. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know I can't run from this forever." "Then you fight," she said firmly. "You fight like a French woman. You fight like you have nothing to lose." As the plane lifted off from Paris, I looked down at the patchwork of vineyards below and made a promise to myself. Whatever happened in the courtroom, whatever Zoe threw at me, I would not go back to being the woman who'd stood in that kitchen 3 weeks ago, accepting the reduction of her life to a problem to be solved. I had learned the taste of freedom, and I would not give it up without a fight. The courtroom smelled of old wood and broken promises. I sat next to Margaret Todd, my hands folded in my lap, wearing the navy dress I'd worn to Zoe's birthday party, the one that had started this whole unraveling. Across the aisle, Zoe sat with her attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia, who looked like she'd been carved from ice. Judge Henry Brown entered, and we all stood. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes that I hoped meant he'd listen to more than just the legal arguments. "This is a petition for conservatorship," he said, settling into his chair. "Mrs. Lofgren, you're alleging that your mother is mentally incompetent and unable to manage her financial affairs?" Zoe's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Finney has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year, culminating in her abrupt decision to give away her primary asset, a home worth nearly $400,000, to an unrelated party, and then fleeing the country." I watched Zoe as her lawyer spoke. My daughter sat rigidly upright, her face composed in an expression of concerned grief that I recognized from her childhood, the same look she'd worn when she'd broken something valuable and was trying to convince me it had been an accident. "We have testimony from neighbors about strange behavior," the lawyer continued. "Mrs. Finney has been seen gardening at inappropriate hours, has made repeated phone calls about the same issues, and has isolated herself from family members who were only trying to help." Margaret stood. "Your Honor, Mrs. Finney is a competent adult who made a legal decision about her own property. The fact that her daughter doesn't like that decision doesn't make it invalid. But it does raise questions," Judge Brown said. "Mrs. Finney, I'd like to hear from you directly. Can you explain your decision to transfer the deed to your house to Mr. Eddie Chase?" I stood, my knees steadier than I'd expected. Eddie is my son, not biologically, but in every way that matters. He's been part of my family for 15 years. He's never asked for anything, never expected anything, never treated my love as something he was entitled to. "But you have a biological daughter," the judge said gently. "Why wouldn't you leave your property to her?" I looked at Zoe, really looked at her, and saw the woman who'd stood in my kitchen 3 weeks ago and informed me that my life was being reorganized for everyone else's convenience. Because she already told me the house would be sold to pay for the assisted living facility she'd chosen for me. She'd already decided my furniture was worthless, my memories were clutter, my choices were irrelevant. I paused, feeling the weight of 32 years of motherhood. She didn't want my house, she wanted its value. "Mom, that's not fair," Zoe said, half rising from her chair. "Isn't it?" I turned to face her fully. "Tell me, Zoe, what did you say to me on your birthday? What exactly did you say about what I could give you?" She flushed, her lawyer placing a restraining hand on her arm. "I don't remember exactly. You said the only thing I could still give you was work. You said it while I was cleaning up the dishes from the party I'd spent 3 days planning, in the kitchen where I'd raised you, in the house where I'd built a life." The courtroom was silent. Judge Brown looked from me to Zoe, then back to me. "Mrs. Finney, can you tell me about your trip to France?" I enrolled in a sommelier course. I've always been interested in wine, but I never had the time or the confidence to pursue it. I stayed in a small village, learned to trust my own palate, remembered what it felt like to be seen as myself, rather than as someone's mother or someone's burden. "And your finances?" I looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "I paid for the trip with my own money. I have no debt, no outstanding obligations. I'm financially independent." "Your Honor," Zoe's lawyer interjected. "Mrs. Finny abandoned her responsibilities, fled the country without telling anyone where she was going, and gave away her most valuable asset to someone she's known for only 15 years. I didn't abandon anything, I said quietly. I chose something. For the first time in 32 years, I chose what I wanted instead of what someone else decided was best for me. Judge Brown leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Lofgren, I'd like to hear from you directly. Why are you seeking conservatorship? Zoe stood, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she'd been. The one who'd climbed into my lap after nightmares, who'd brought me dandelions and called them flowers. I'm worried about her, she said, and I heard genuine emotion in her voice. She's been alone since Dad died. She's getting older. I just wanted to make sure she was taken care of. By putting her in assisted living against her will? By making sure she had professional care available? By making sure she wasn't isolated or vulnerable? And the house? The house is too big for her. Too expensive to maintain. The money would be better used for her care. Better for whom? I asked. And the question hung in the air like smoke. Judge Brown called a recess. In the hallway, Margaret gripped my arm. You're doing well. Stay calm. Stay truthful. Eddie appeared beside me, Christine at his side. How are you holding up? I'm okay. I looked at this young man who'd become my son, who'd never asked for anything but had given me everything. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to give the house back. Mom, he said firmly. We're family. Family doesn't abandon each other. When court reconvened, Judge Brown had reached his decision. This is a difficult case, he said. Mrs. Finney, you've clearly made some dramatic life changes recently. Mrs. Lofgren, your concern for your mother is understandable. But concern doesn't override autonomy. He paused, looking at both of us. Mrs. Finney has demonstrated that she is mentally competent, financially capable, and able to make informed decisions about her own life. The fact that her daughter disagrees with those decisions doesn't constitute grounds for conservatorship. I felt my knees go weak with relief. However, the judge continued, this family clearly has some communication issues that need to be addressed. Mrs. Finney, while you had every right to give your property to whomever you chose, the abrupt nature of your departure did cause distress. He looked at Zoe. Mrs. Lofgren, your mother is 63 years old, not 93. She's entitled to live her life as she sees fit, even if that includes travel, career changes, or decisions about her estate that you find surprising. The gavel came down. Petition for conservatorship is denied. In the hallway afterward, Zoe approached me. Her face was streaked with tears. Her composed mask finally cracked. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I was just worried. I looked at her. This woman I'd raised. This person I'd loved so completely that I'd lost myself in the process. You were worried about your inheritance, Zoe. There's a difference. That's not true. Then prove it, I said quietly. Prove that you want a relationship with me, not a relationship with what I can give you. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I have to go, I said finally. I have a plane to catch. As I walked away, I heard her voice behind me, small and lost. Mom, please don't go. I stopped, turned back, and looked at her one last time. I'll be in France for 3 more weeks. If you want to know me as something other than your mother, as something other than a problem to be solved, you know where to find me. Then I walked toward the door, toward Eddie and Christine waiting in the sunlight, toward a life that belonged entirely to me. The harvest moon hung low over the vineyards as I walked between the rows of vines. My hands stained purple from the day's work. 2 months had passed since the court hearing, and I was finishing my sommelier certification with a practical internship at Domaine des Rochettes, a small family winery where I'd convinced the owner to let me work in exchange for room and board. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Eddie with a photo of Christine and the children carving pumpkins on the front porch of my old house. Their house now. The roses were blooming late in the background, defiant against the approaching winter. Looking good, Mom, his message read. The house is happy. I smiled, typing back. So am I. It was true. My body ached from the physical work. My French was still clumsy, and I was living in a converted barn loft with questionable plumbing, but I was happier than I'd been in years. I'd learned to taste the difference between grapes grown in clay soil and those grown in limestone. I'd memorized the wine regions of France and could discuss the impact of terroir on flavor profiles. I'd made friends with the other harvest workers, a mix of locals and travelers who treated me not as someone's mother or someone's problem, but as Barbara, a woman who'd decided to change her life at 63 and had the courage to do it. "Barbara," called Jean-Claude, the vineyard owner. "Telephone for you." I climbed down from the ladders, wiping my hands on my apron. Inside the small office, he handed me the phone with a knowing smile. "Mama?" I almost didn't recognize the voice. Soft, uncertain, younger than I'd heard it in years. "Hello, Zoe. I'm at the airport, in Paris. I was hoping we could talk." I sat down heavily in Jean-Claude's chair, my heart hammering. "How did you find me?" "Eddie gave me the address. He said you invited me to come." I had, in a moment of hope and wine-induced courage, sent her a letter 2 weeks ago. I'd written it by hand, in French and English, explaining where I was and why I was staying. I'd ended it with an invitation. "If you want to know who I am when I'm not being your mother, come see me. I'm in Paris until tomorrow morning," she continued. "Then I fly to Tours. I have a rental car. I could be there by afternoon." "Why?" I asked. "Why now?" There was a long pause. "Because I miss you. Because I've been thinking about what you said in the courtroom. Because I want to understand what happened. Understanding isn't the same as accepting. I know, but I want to try." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the village, past the small church where I'd started attending Sunday Mass, even though I didn't speak enough French to understand the homily. I thought about Zoe as a child, the way she'd insisted on helping me cook even when she was too small to reach the counter. I thought about her teenage years, when she'd slam doors and accuse me of not understanding her life. I thought about her wedding day, when she'd cried in my arms and told me she hoped she'd be half the mother I was. When had we stopped seeing each other? When had love become obligation, relationship become transaction? The next afternoon, I was working in the tasting room when I heard a car pull into the gravel driveway. Through the window, I saw a small white rental car and a woman getting out, looking around uncertainly. Zoe had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered. "She's here," I told Jean-Claude. "Bonne chance," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Remember, you are the one with the power now." I walked outside, my heart beating fast. Zoe saw me and stopped, her hand still on the car door. "Hi?" she said softly. "Hi." "Oh." We stood there for a moment, two women who'd shared a lifetime but had somehow become strangers. "You look different," she said finally. "I feel different. You look happy." I nodded. "I am." She closed the car door and walked toward me slowly. "I brought you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. I know it's not much, but inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. William and me at her college graduation, both of us beaming with pride. We looked so young, so hopeful, so certain that love was enough. "I found it when I was cleaning out Dad's study," she said. I thought you might want it." I held the photo, feeling the weight of 23 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together. "Thank you. Mom, I need to tell you something. When the judge denied the conservatorship, I was angry. But not just angry. I was scared. I was scared of losing you. But I was also scared of losing the idea of you. The idea that you'd always be there, always be the same, always be my mother first, and everything else second." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear beneath the anger. "I'm still your mother, Zoe, but I'm also other things now. Can you teach me?" she asked. "About wine, I mean. About whatever it is you're learning here." I smiled. "Come on. Let's start with a basic tasting." We walked into the cool stone cellar where Jean-Claude stored his best vintages. I selected a bottle of the estate's signature Chinon, the same varietal I'd first learned to appreciate in my classes. "Wine tells a story," I said, echoing Marie's words as I poured 2 glasses. "But you have to be quiet enough to listen." Zoe held the glass awkwardly, clearly out of her element. I don't know anything about wine. Neither did I 2 months ago. I swirled my glass, watching the wine cling to the sides. But I learned to trust what I taste instead of what I think I should taste. She took a tentative sip, her face scrunching slightly. It's earthy? Good. What else? She tried again, more thoughtfully this time. There's something like cherries, but darker? Very good. You're tasting the terroir, the soil, the climate, the hand of the winemaker. I set down my glass. Zoe, can I ask you something? When did you stop trusting your own taste? She looked confused. What do you mean? When did you start letting other people tell you what you should want? When did you decide that Richard's opinion mattered more than your own, that your friend's approval was more important than your happiness? Her face flushed. I don't. You do. You've been performing the life you think you should have, instead of living the life you actually want. Just like I was. She was quiet for a long time, staring into her wine glass as if it might hold answers. I don't even know what I want anymore. I know what I'm supposed to want. The bigger house, the better neighborhood, the right schools for the kids. But I can't remember the last time I wanted something just for myself. Then that's where you start. Over the next 3 days, Zoe stayed in the village inn and spent her time at the vineyard with me. I watched her slowly relax, saw her designer mask slip away to reveal the curious, thoughtful woman underneath. She helped with the harvest, getting dirt under her manicured nails and wine stains on her clothes. She laughed with the other workers, stumbled through conversations in broken French, and slowly began to trust her own palate in our evening tastings. On her last night, we sat on the terrace overlooking the vineyards, sharing a bottle of the estate's oldest vintage. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. A real one. Not the kind where I apologize for hurting your feelings but secretly think you're being too sensitive. I waited. I treated you like a resource instead of a person. I saw your house as my inheritance, your independence as my inconvenience, your choices as my problems to solve. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I lost sight of who you were before you were my mother. Who was I asked, genuinely curious to hear her answer. You were the woman who taught herself to play piano when you were 40 because you'd always wanted to learn. You were the woman who read 3 books a week and always had opinions about everything. You were the woman who made Dad laugh until he cried, who threw dinner parties where everyone felt welcome, who could fix a leaky faucet and bake a perfect soufflé on the same day. She paused. You were the woman I wanted to be when I grew up, before I decided that growing up meant becoming someone else entirely. The words hung between us in the warm evening air, weighted with 32 years of love and misunderstanding. I don't know how to fix this, she said finally. I don't know how to be your daughter without being entitled to your life. You start by being honest about what you want from me. Not what you think you deserve, not what you think I owe you, but what you actually want our relationship to be. She thought for a long moment. I want to know you, the real you, not just the mother version. I want to learn things from you that have nothing to do with parenting or family obligations. She struggled for the words. I want to be proud of you the way you've always been proud of me, even when I didn't deserve it. And what are you willing to give in return? Whatever you need. Space if you need space. Time if you need time. Respect, definitely respect. She looked at me directly. And I want to try being someone you could be proud of too. Not just your successful daughter, but someone worth knowing. The next morning, I drove her to the train station in Tours. She was flying back to Chicago, back to her life. But something fundamental had shifted between us. Will you come home for Christmas? She asked as we stood on the platform. I don't know, I said honestly. I might stay here through the spring. I've been offered a position at a winery in Burgundy. A job? A real job. Assistant sommelier at a restaurant that specializes in small production wines. I couldn't hide my excitement. It's not much money, but I'd have my own apartment above the restaurant, and I'd be doing something I love. She hugged me then, tight and fierce. I'm proud of you, Mom. I'm proud that you were brave enough to leave, and I'm proud that you were strong enough to build something new. As her train disappeared around the bend, I drove back to the vineyard with my heart full and my future uncertain. That evening, I called Eddie. How would you feel if I stayed in France permanently? I asked. I'd miss you like crazy, he said without hesitation. But I'd be happy that you found your place in the world. And Zoe? Zoe came by yesterday. She looked different. Lighter somehow. She asked if she could bring the kids to see the roses when they bloom in spring. He paused. She also asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her. What did you tell her? I told her that love isn't about forgiveness. It's about choosing each other every day as the people you actually are instead of the people you wish you were. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position in Burgundy. I packed my few belongings and drove north through the French countryside, past vineyards dressed in autumn gold and villages that had stood for centuries. In my new apartment above Restaurant Le Terroir, I unpacked the photo Zoe had given me and placed it on my bedside table. William and me, young and hopeful, believing in the future we were building together. I had built that future. I had raised a daughter, loved a husband, created a home, given freely of myself for decades. And now, in this small room overlooking the cobblestone streets of Beaune, I was building something else. A life that belonged entirely to me. 6 months later, Zoe sent me a letter. She was taking French lessons. She and Richard were seeing a marriage counselor. She'd quit her corporate job and was volunteering at a literacy program, something she'd always wanted to do but had never made time for. I'm learning to trust my own taste, she wrote. In wine, in work, in life. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. I wrote back, inviting her to visit in the spring when the vines would be flowering and the countryside would be dressed in green. I told her about my promotion to head sommelier, about the small wine appreciation classes I'd started teaching to tourists, about the man named Paul who owned the bookshop across the street and who had started joining me for morning coffee. But mostly, I told her about the woman I'd become, someone who trusted her own palate, who spoke her mind in 2 languages, who had learned that love without autonomy was just another kind of cage. The letter ended with an invitation. Come see who your mother is when she's not being your mother. I think you'll like her. As I sealed the envelope, I looked out my window at the vineyards stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere in those vines, grapes were slowly ripening, transforming from simple fruit into something complex and nuanced, something that could only be fully appreciated by those willing to pay attention. I had learned, finally, to pay attention to my own transformation, and I had discovered that the vintage of my life was far from finished. It was just reaching its peak.